Welcome everyone. My name is Karin England. I'm a landscape architect with Metro Vancouver Regional Parks, and I'm here today to share with you sustainable gardening practices and talk about the Grow Green Guide, which is a web-based resource developed collaboratively between Metro Vancouver and the UBC Botanical Garden to support gardeners in our region. I'd like to begin by saying that Metro Vancouver acknowledges that our region's residents live, work, and learn on the shared territories of many Indigenous peoples, including 10 local First Nations: Katzie, Kwantlen, Coquitlam, Matsqui, Musqueam, Kikite, Semiahmoo, Squamish, Tsawwassen, and Tsleil-Waututh. And at this time of year, as we are celebrating bounty and harvest, I would like to personally thank the example that First Nations set for how to harvest in a sustainable way and to nurture the land. Today is the final segment of our 6-part 2024 live stream gardening series. This year we've talked about pollinator gardens, food forests, biodiversity and invasive species, climate-friendly gardening, and water-wise gardening. Today we have a doozy in line for you. We have with us today David Speight from the UBC. He's the Executive Chef and Culinary Director at UBC. We're going to be talking today about harvesting food from your garden, climate-friendly cooking, and tips for making the most of your harvest. David, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me, Karin. Nice to be back.
I know that the last time we had you on, people were very excited to have you here, so thank you so much for coming again. Much anticipated. We're very excited to have you here today. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit about your background. How did you come to be where you are, and what interest drew you to the work that you're doing?
Sure, thank you. I am born and raised in this area, so I am a Vancouver boy, and I've been a professional chef in the city for 30 years now. It started very humbly in the dish pits of a local restaurant, Mother Tucker's in Coquitlam, way back when. And in that job, I just fell in love with the industry and the people and the work of being a cook at that time. And I was inspired to get my education. I got my apprenticeship program at Vancouver Community College, and then went to further my education at the Culinary Institute of America in Hyde Park, New York, and get my professional chef's degree. As I worked through and developed my career, I had executive chef positions at big Vancouver restaurants such as Monk McQueen's, Bridges Restaurant, and then I transitioned into a much larger role as the executive chef of Rogers Arena, working with the Vancouver Canucks, and I did that for 6 years and got to experience things like the 2010 Winter Olympics, the 2011 run to the Stanley Cup, as well as numerous concerts and large marquee events held at that venue. And then in 2014, I transitioned and moved here to my position at UBC, where I've been proudly the executive chef here for the last 10 years. And I thoroughly love what I do, and working at UBC really gives me great opportunity to make real positive changes at a very, very large scale within our food system. So really excited to be doing the work that I do.
It sounds like you've had enough experience to write several books that would all be bestsellers. What incredible breadth of experience. So for people who are tuned in, I think that it would be great if you could provide some questions and see if you can try and stump David. I bet you'll have a hard time stumping him with your questions today. Over the course of your career, I imagine you've seen quite a shift in the way we approach cooking, with an increased focus on sustainability and supporting local food systems. Would you be willing to talk a bit about that, and particularly what UBC is doing in that area?
Yes, happy to. So very early in my career, we didn't really talk about sustainability in the kitchen. It certainly wasn't taught in the cooking schools that I went to. It wasn't really mainstream. Some great chefs absolutely understood the importance of sustainability and positive food systems. But at that point in my career, I really didn't. And one of the first things that really opened my eye to food and sustainability was around seafood. So when I was the executive chef at Monk McQueen's, we would be able to purchase Chilean sea bass, and we could sell as much as we bought in. If we brought in 40 pounds, it would be gone. If we bought in 60 pounds, it would be gone. The consumers loved it. So it was a really great ingredient for us to use in our operation. However, it was completely unsustainable. And I remember I had a food critic coming down to see me at the restaurant and try out my food and write a review. And she, in my opinion, I thought she didn't show up. We were waiting for her, and she called me the next day, and she said, "Yeah, I absolutely did show up, but I noticed that I looked at your menu and you were serving Chilean sea bass, and I won't eat in a restaurant that does that." And so I started asking questions, and when I asked those questions, I learned about the unsustainable fishing practices around Chilean sea bass. And as we continued to order sea bass, I saw it firsthand. And the fish used to be really large fillets. And over time, they were getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And so I started asking more questions, and I learned that Chilean sea bass took 7 years to grow to full maturation, which is much longer than, say, a salmon or another fish. Combine that with poor fishing regulations in Chile, where the fish was prevalent. They were literally pulling them out of the water faster than they could regrow and respawn. So that was kind of my first understanding of the importance of the decisions that I had as an executive chef. And then, so I really got excited about that. Oceanwise started coming out right around that time. So I got involved with them and learned about sustainable seafood and really adopted those practices. And then it was at Rogers Arena where I saw the waste on that scale. It was massive, as you could imagine, based on the size of the venue and the amount of customers that would flow through in an evening. And at that point in time, there was garbage and there was cardboard, and everything else went to landfill. There was no composting, both front of the house or back of the house. So I started working with Metro Vancouver to create a front-facing recycling and composting program for the arena. And that was really positive. And then I moved into UBC and wanted to continue those. UBC was already invested into great things like local purchasing. At that time, I was also a member of the Vancouver Food Policy, so I could really understand the impacts at a citywide level and the importance of these decisions. So it's really grown from there. And now I understand the importance of plant-based eating, local purchasing. All these things have a huge impact, and especially at the scale here at UBC. The size and scope of what we do has a really big impact. And then you combine that with the fact that we are a place of learning, and students are here to get an education. And so what a great opportunity for us to showcase that in our operations and try to provide them with a food education while they're here getting whichever education they've chosen to come for.
It sounds like you've been on a really important journey, and you've been able to make some really big changes that are having an impact. So thanks for that. Also, as someone who went to UBC and someone who still does some teaching at UBC, I think that even if you're not studying food systems, you can see the thinking that's being put into the sustainability of the food system and the recycling system, and you're passively learning about our responsibilities, our personal responsibilities around sustainability and food. Even if you're not studying to be a chef, for example. I don't know if you can study to be a chef at UBC, maybe not, but food systems certainly. I've got a couple of questions for you, if you don't mind. The first would be, what's your top tips for using fall harvest foods in the kitchen?
That's a great question. Thank you for that. So I think it even begins before you get in the kitchen. And it may sound really simple and obvious, but not everyone does it, and that is to plan ahead. So when you're planting your garden, know what's going to come up and be harvested and at what point in time, so that when that time comes, you have a plan in place and you're not overwhelmed with the bounty of your crop and don't know what to do. So certainly plan ahead. Another thing I would say is to experiment with new ingredients, new recipes perhaps. I would encourage you to buy a plant-based cookbook and test out new recipes that maybe you haven't worked with before, to round out your culinary knowledge and be able to utilize different ingredients in new and exciting ways. For example, it's October and apple season is upon us, and so try out new sweet and savory apple recipes. As we move into late autumn, we have pumpkin and squash coming up. One of the personal things that I like to do is make a roasted pumpkin penne using the pumpkin puree with coconut milk to make a super tasty cream sauce. So really, it's all about planning ahead, expanding your knowledge, trying new things, and like I say, doing different things with your food. And I think you'll have fun with it, and you'll be able to use those crops in new and exciting ways.
This is excellent advice. I know there's lots of online resources. You don't have to invest in a new cookbook if you don't necessarily want to. There's lots of Google searches you can do, 101 cookbooks, Heidi Swanson. There's lots of people who are doing good, free, accessible recipes. And also, shout out to the public library. Also, I enjoy reading through cookbooks and leafing through them, and I will often get cookbooks out of the library just to check out. That's really helpful. You're saying have a plan in place. So would that include getting together with some neighbors? For example, I've got a neighbor with a kiwi tree and I've got a pear tree, and sometimes we'll do a swap because I've got more pears than I can use and they've got more kiwis than I can use. So maybe connecting with your neighbors in your community to see who's got what and doing some kind of swapping, I think is a good strategy. Mm-hmm. Are there any new plants or foods that you've been seeing coming up in the market? Things that people are using now that they maybe weren't using 5 or 10 years ago?
Yeah, not so much new. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, but I would like to highlight the use of celery. It's easy for me to say celeriac as an ingredient. It's a really great root vegetable that's very versatile and lends itself to a lot of different cooking techniques, whether it's roasting or pureeing. I might like to make a celeriac puree with some nutmeg and some light cream, and it's really good alternative to say mashed potatoes. So trying to just use different things and incorporating new vegetables into maybe typical dishes. And one of the things, you can make pesto, which is typically done with basil and pine nuts. Tried something else. I just made a pesto with arugula and pumpkin seeds, just because they're in season and fresh right now. So substituting, different ingredients for standard recipes is also a fun way to play around and learn about new things and get new flavors and experience new tastes. Is a really good tip.
Yeah, really good advice. Sometimes I see things in the grocery store that I don't know what they are and they just look ugly and weird. And rather than running away from those, I'm starting to lean in. Celeriac is one of those things. I had a fabulous meal of celeriac last weekend and I'd never really had it before. And now I can't wait to try it again. So yeah, be curious, I guess I would say also as you're going through the grocery store. See what's local and fresh and don't be afraid to try it out. Another question for you. Do you have any good tips or techniques for harvesting foods that you're growing at home at this time of year?
Sure. Yes, absolutely. So, just because summer is over doesn't mean your garden season needs to be done for the year. Late season vegetables can be a real treasure, and they offer one last blast of freshness before the cold sets in. So don't stop your gardening. Late season vegetables can often become sweeter as the cooler temperatures begin, so the flavor profile changes a little bit, and that can be fun. But please keep in mind timing is important. For vegetables such as carrots, parsnips, beets, because as the cool temperatures set in, like I mentioned, they do get sweeter and the flavor profile changes. But you do want to harvest them before the hard frost hits. So I would say be patient, and then also note that timing is important to get the most out of your late season crops. When we're talking about watering, it's easy, especially as we, come through a weekend that we just had here in Vancouver, that you could forget to water your crops, but they still need water. And I would say shifting to more of a morning watering at this time of year so that the crops do have the entire day to absorb the moisture before the cool overnight temperatures set in. And I think it's going to produce some good results for you as well. So those are a couple things I would add.
Are there certain fruits or vegetables that store particularly well if you were to harvest them now, for example? What really stores well for a long time?
So this time of year, these the types of crops that are coming up now are also tend to be the crops that do store quite well. We refer to them as storage crops sometimes. So I'm talking about carrots, beets, potatoes. They all have a really, really good shelf life. Cabbage is absolutely best when it's freshest, but it also will last up to 2 months in a refrigerator if it's well wrapped and taken care of. So, some of these vegetables that are coming up right now do have a very, very long shelf life, which is positive because this is also the time of year that we're going into, the colder months, the winter months, where really there isn't a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables in our area. So it's also very nice that these late season crops are also the ones that do tend to last a little bit longer.
Great advice. I often think of people who are living in very cold climates and what their traditional food sources are. And I think of borscht or, potato soup or things like that as kind of guidance to what you could do with your locally available food throughout the winter. We have got a question coming in from someone who's tuned in asking, what are the best plants or vegetables for a beginner home gardener interested in sustainability?
Yeah, great question. So I think first off, if you're growing your own food, you're already winning the game. That's one of the things that I like to talk about the most. Not only, mainly I talk more about cooking your own food and having the food skills and knowledge to be able to prepare basic meals for yourself. We also like to say, know who makes your food. And so if you're growing your own food, obviously you're doing well in that regard. So great first step. Another thing I would say is try things, and they may or may not work, but keep notes, keep a gardening notebook. That will help you understand what worked well, what didn't work well. And just because it didn't work one year, I would encourage you to try it again another year because, weather, seasons, soil composition, all these things change over time. And a crop that kind of fell flat one year might have a really great season the next year. So don't just simply give up on it because it didn't work. But I would encourage you to certainly make notes, plan out your process, and it's easy to remember what worked well at the end of the season, but then as you enter spring and planting season next year, you may have forgotten. So, keep a running tab of your garden. I think that would be helpful.
This is something I keep and I always forget to update it, and then I'm left with a big pile of remembering to do at the end of the summer. But it's excellent advice. Keeping track of what you've grown in the past, what's working and what's not working, and being persistent or not giving up. You mentioned sourcing food locally, and if you don't have a large garden or a space to garden, I think that there are other choices about how you can get local food. There are community-supported agriculture groups in Vancouver that you can subscribe to and get a weekly or bi-weekly drop-off of vegetables. Things like, I don't know, Spud is one that comes to mind. Also, if you're looking for locally harvested, sustainably harvested seafood, Skipper Auto is a place where you can subscribe and get a membership, and you know where your fish is coming from and that it's being sourced ethically. I recommend, I don't know if I'm allowed to recommend those. I know that they're available and they're out there for you if you're interested in learning more about them. Also, there are associations or commercial operations that will divert ugly food from the waste stream. So if you're a food producer and you've got some carrots that instead of having one nice straight root, have two roots and they look funny and they're not good enough to be sold in the grocery store, rather than having those things go to waste, they'll put clients in touch with that resource and sell them at a fraction of the price of what you could be buying them for in a pretty food in the grocery store. So there are also delivery services available like that in Vancouver if you're looking at making a difference in what goes in the waste stream.
Karen, can I
Another,
jump in on, can I jump in on that?
absolutely.
Yeah, there's lots there that you said that I just love to chime in on. Community supported agriculture boxes, I think, are really, really great. A bunch of reasons. One is that you pay up front. So the farmer knows that they have revenue for the food they're going to grow before they even grow it. And for a farmer, that is really, really important. It's foundational to their success in some regards. So that is a great reason to do that. The other great reason to do that, beyond the fact that you get this box delivered to you on whatever time frame is arranged, coming to your door, you also don't know what's in that box. So when I talk about trying new things and being curious about foods, this is an awesome way to do it, because literally you're at the farmer's discretion as far as what you're going to get. And oftentimes you won't even know about a vegetable, and you're going to be forced to maybe do some research on that and try something new, and hopefully have some fun with it, and be turned on to a brand new vegetable. So really great that you brought that up. I'd also like to, sing the praises of Skipperado. They are doing amazing work in the sustainable seafood realm and traceability. When you buy from them, you know exactly who caught fish at what time, where they caught it, and on what ship. So they're really putting a face to the food that you buy, and that's never been done before in the city, to my knowledge. So really proud of the work that they're doing. So I just wanted to share a couple comments on that there. Thanks, Karen.
Wonderful. Yeah, I get a box once a week from Odd Bunch, and I don't know what's coming in it. So it causes me to be experimental and try new things. And I don't know, I'm enjoying it actually. I'm enjoying the learning that comes through that experience. It's fun. It's like getting a present. You don't know what's in the box until you open it. I mean, you have a rough idea. They tell you pretty much what you're going to get, but there might be some surprises each week. So I'm really enjoying that. What about preserving and storing food? Do you have any tips about how to reduce food waste?
Yeah, so preserving and storing for sure. So pickling, canning, if you're into that, is a great way to extend the season. One of the gifts of the pandemic, I would say, for us, is we had a whole lot of time on our hands in the first summer of the pandemic, with not a lot of customers. At the same time, the UBC farm had a whole lot of crops, also with not a lot of customers. So we partnered with them, bought a whole lot of their products, and we embarked on a pickling and canning and preserving program over the summer with our chefs. And it was so successful that we just do that every summer now as part of our core business. It allows us to feed our students amazing organic fruits and vegetables from the UBC farm deep into January, February, March. As our university environment doesn't line up so well with the growing season. So our students come here in September, and so for September and October, there's a great bounty of UBC farm fruits and vegetables that we can share with them. But then as we move into November, December, January, February, those are really not great months for local produce in our province based on the weather. So doing things to preserve and extend the seasonality of those foods has been really, really positive for us. So that's something that we've done on that front that's been well received.
I think some people are intimidated at the thought of pickling and canning, and they maybe didn't see other people in their family doing it when they're growing up, and it's a bit frightening to people. Are there, I guess, two questions from that. Are there easy places to learn how to do that? Or if you are not willing to learn how to do that, are there other ways to preserve food other than pickling or canning?
Yeah, so I mean, it can be a bit, daunting if you've never done it before, and I can certainly tell you, days gone past, that was absolutely the standard for so many people, and we've really gotten away from that, which is too bad. I see a bit of a resurgence to some of those skills more recently, which is positive, but it can be, scary to take on if you've never done it. I will say. There are no shortage of resources online, to teach yourself, YouTube videos, websites that you can read, recipes that you can follow. And I will tell you that if you follow the recipes, it's really not that scary. You're not going to be doing it en masse. You're not going to be doing it and selling it to the private, to people out in the world there. You're going to be doing it for yourself at your home. And so if it doesn't work out, that's okay. Try again. And if it does, you've learned a new skill and a new task. So I would encourage you to do so.
Excellent. I've also had some luck just on a small scale, even if you just had a balcony garden, preserving herbs, growing herbs and preserving them in salt so that you have them to just take a pinch of the garden. I call it gardener's salt. There's probably a proper chef word for that. I'm sorry, David. Gardener's salt that I use to flavor soups, or when I'm doing cooking, I will throw it in there. So even on a small scale, with very minimal effort, there's a way to preserve something of the food that you're growing, and use it throughout the year. Also, freezers, right? You can also save stuff in your freezer rather than processing it and canning it and putting stuff up in jars. Metro Vancouver also has a campaign, the Love Food Hate Waste campaign, and I believe that we'll be sharing a link in the chat with you if you want to learn more about reducing your food waste. So lots of information through Metro Vancouver as well. I'd like to move on maybe to climate-friendly food choices. Can you give us some insights on what types of climate-friendly food gardeners can grow well at home? What should we be considering when we choose plants to grow at our home?
Yeah, so I think, like I said earlier, if you're growing your own food, you're already doing really, really well. One thing about growing your own food, you get to you're in control. You get to decide what you plant and when to harvest it and what you're going to do with it. So that's nice. Beyond that, you're also cutting down on transportation of that food. You're cutting down on packaging that you would see in a grocery store or a retail environment. So those are both positives as well. As far as what types, I would talk to local farmers, see what they're growing. If they're growing them in this region, it means it works. BC has a really great. We have all 4 seasons very, very distinctly, so it is a really good growing region. Outside of tropical crops and citrus fruits, avocados, bananas, that types of things, most produces. Produce ingredients work really well in Vancouver. Greens grow really well if you have less light. I would encourage you to grow more greens. If you struggle with sunlight, root vegetables probably aren't going to work really well. But if you have a good garden that has a lot of light, root vegetables will work well. Tomatoes grow really, really well in Vancouver. As well as I would encourage you to expand beyond produce into fresh berries. And if you have space, edible landscapes such as apple trees or pear trees or such like that. So really think about what BC farmers are growing and if they can make it work. Unless it's in a hothouse environment, it'll work really well in your home garden as well.
Excellent advice. I would just like to chime in as a landscape architect about growing fruit trees in small spaces. There is a practice called espalier, where you train a tree to grow rather than a kind of large modular shape, which it would normally do as like a vase shape. You can train it to grow in a kind of two-dimensional plane so that it looks, it looks a bit like a lattice or a trellis on its own. And there's a way to grow apples, certainly other fruit trees, in a very small space. If you've got the right growing conditions, you can make that work. And there are people usually in my neighborhood anyway, of the old Italian people, are growing lemon trees quite successfully in Vancouver if they've got a place to store the trees in the winter just in big pots, and they haul them in and out and care for them that way. Their Phoenix Perennials out in Richmond has a large selection of citrus that they are peddling, and I've got a couple growing and they seem to be working. And a plea for anyone else who has an avocado, someone sweet in my life gave me, how you could take an avocado pit and you put toothpicks in it, you put it in a cup, and show kids how they can grow an avocado tree out of an avocado pit, except that mine is now 4 feet tall, and I don't know what to do with it now. And I think that if it should ever reach the point where it's looking for love and wants to make baby avocados, I'm not going to be able to find it a mate. So if anyone else has a lonely avocado out there, let me know. and maybe we can grow some avocados together. Yeah, that's a bit of a diversion. Anyway, moving onward, we had a question from Tara Moreau, who's at the UBC Botanical Garden. When we were preparing for this segment, she was saying, what about millets and pulses? Are these plants considered particularly sustainable? Are there a wider variety of fruits, nuts, and grains that we could be growing that people don't often think of?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's really important when we think about foods. I mean, especially at the scale that I work in with our food budgets, but it's to diversify the ingredients that you're working with. You know, and the more that we diversify, the more resilience we'll have within our food system. And so pulses, legumes absolutely play a huge role in that. We've been working really hard to train ourselves and work on recipes using an abundance of different types of vegetables and grains, as opposed to just, you know, potatoes and brown rice over and over again. You know, our students also eat with us every single day. It's not like a restaurant that you may go to once a month or what have you. So we need to change our menu frequently. Our menu literally changes every single day. And so we try to build in as much diversity amongst our ingredients as possible. And that's forced us to learn more because, you know, when you're working with new ingredients, you may not have a breadth of knowledge that you do with the more traditional ones. But that also makes you a better chef. It makes you more knowledgeable about food in general. And it's a really good positive spin-off, as well as providing a variety of products to our students, as well as utilizing different ingredients so that we're not so reliant on the same ones over and over again. So thank you for that question, Tara. I think that's really important for us to think about.
Yeah. Going back to the idea of having things that can last through the winter, if I've grown beans before and dried them, then you have them for the whole winter and that's a really easy plant to grow. You don't need to be intimidated by growing your own beans. It's something that I think anyone can do. I have a question here. Knowing that you're a chef and I guess wanting to capitalize on having your brain here at the moment, do you have any new popular plant-based standalone dishes that you would be willing to share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for the question around plant-based. So I think to provide a greater context, if we're talking about sustainable food systems, it has to start with eating more plants and less red meat. That's paramount to a sustainable food system for sure.
Hey, David, why is that? Maybe you could just share with people who might not be aware. Why is that?
Sure. Yeah, I forget that not everyone knows, but I mean, it's been well proven by science that you know, the factory farm meat industry is a huge driver of climate change and increased GHGs and emissions in our atmosphere. And so, if you're eating meat, particularly ruminant animals, meat, beef, dairy, lamb. You know, those products have a much more significant impact on our environment. And I'm not here to tell everyone to become vegans and vegetarians by any means, but I would encourage everybody to eat less red meat and eat more plant-based menu offerings as much as possible. It's also a healthier way to eat. But it goes beyond just red meat and plants. We talked about Ocean Wise a little bit earlier. And sustainable seafood. It can be a really great choice, really healthy product. But when you are choosing seafood, make sure you're choosing the sustainable source. Look for that Ocean Wise logo to inform your decisions around what types of seafoods that you're buying. So it goes beyond that. And if you are going to eat meat, I would just encourage you, red meat, I would encourage you to eat a little bit less of it. And if you can afford it, and I know that not everybody can, but try to buy a local grass-fed beef product. As opposed to a factory farm product, that's also going to have a lower impact on the climate and quite frankly, a better finished product as well. But I also acknowledge that, a lot of those choices come with a heftier price tag. And so you have to balance that with what you can afford for sure. But then going back to cooking at home, that's going to be your best bet. The more meals you can prepare for yourself, it's going to save you money, and you have full control over the ingredients that go in your dishes. And ultimately, you can eat a healthier diet if you're preparing that for yourself. But I also acknowledge that everyone lives in a very busy world, and meal preparation, shopping, cooking, cleaning up all takes time. So you need to balance that with your priorities in life. But being able to cook for yourself and have those basic food skills, to me, is paramount for a good foundation for healthy eating, for sure. I think the question, I went on a bit of a rant there, but I think the question was around plant-based recipes. One I'm happy to share with you, just because I make this dish. I make this dish with my daughter, and it's something that we enjoy making together. It tastes really great, and another reason why I talk about this dish is because it is really hearty. And if you feel like you need to eat meat with every meal, you say you can't get filled up from a plant-based dish, I would challenge you to try this dish, because it really does provide great flavor, great health, and also it fills you up. So the dish is a sweet potato stuffed burritos. So you're taking either a sweet potato or a yam, and you're roasting those whole, similar to like a baked potato. And then you're going to slice those open. And then separately, you're going to cook some brown rice and add in some black beans. The rice and beans combo provides a great amount of protein for your dish. So you're going to put that in, and then I like to top it with some fresh pico de gallo. So using some tomatoes from your garden, some fresh herbs from your garden, a little red onion, little lime juice. You've got a beautiful fresh pico. And then add some fresh guacamole at the end. It's really fresh flavors with the pico and the guacamole, but you also got the heartiness of the sweet potatoes and the rice and beans, and all those flavors complement each other very, very well, and it creates a really great finished product. So I like to share that recipe with as many people as possible, because I do think it ticks a lot of boxes.
That sounds delicious. Is it lunchtime yet?
Absolutely.
That sounds wonderful. Thanks for sharing. This brings us to the conclusion of our broadcast today, unless you have any other final thoughts that you'd like to share with us and our audience.
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, I'm really proud of the work that we're doing here at UBC, and I would be remiss to not mention some of the great initiatives. When we talk about sustainable food systems, we talk about plant-based eating. So very proud to share that at UBC in our 3 residence dining halls, 55% of all of our entrees are plant-based entrees. So that's a combination of vegan and vegetarian dishes. So we like to think that we've created a environment where you can choose plant-based more frequently. And also, to help support that decision, we've created a climate-friendly food label, which is the first of its kind in any Canadian university, and to date the only one in any Canadian university. And it is I say simple because it's simple to the end user, but I can assure you that a lot of work goes in behind the scenes to evaluate the recipes. But it's a simple stoplight system, simply a red, yellow, green. Red, choose less often, green, choose most frequently, and then yellow is kind of in between. So it's designed to help educate and guide our students to make a healthier choice for the planet as they make decisions for their food. And then lastly, I'd like to talk about local food and how that plays into sustainable food systems. And we're really proud here at UBC. Happy to share that at last count, we source 47% of all of our food and beverage purchases within the province of British Columbia. And that number may not mean a lot to a lot of people, but I can tell you that the industry standard is somewhere around 20%. So we're well ahead of that. And the sheer impact of that. So in 1 year alone, we'll spend $20 million on food and beverage. So that 47% roughly equates to $9.8 million that we reinvested into the BC economy for food processors, farmers, food growers, fishermen, fisherwomen. And so we're really proud of that. We also know that when we spend, let's say, $1 on food, if we spend it within the province, that 67 cents of that dollar stays in the province. And when we spend it globally, only 13 cents of that dollar stays in the province. So economically, it's a really important thing for us to do to support our province and the people of British Columbia. but also to have our food be sourced closer to where it's going to be eaten, which is also going to yield really great results. And lastly, within that local food commitment, we want to take it one step further and create opportunities for small scale, local, maybe family owned businesses to sell to us. So we create space for women owned businesses, people of color owned businesses, Indigenous owned businesses that are on the smaller scale that would normally not have an opportunity to sell to a large institution such as UBC. And we try to break down those barriers and create opportunities for them to sell their products to us so that we can support them with our purchases and also share their great products with our students here at UBC. So thanks for letting me share those last few things.
It sounds like really good work that's going on up there and quite impactful. At a personal level, maybe I could just throw out some ideas about how to support local farmers from an individual instead of a institutional scale. And you can tell me if I'm off base here or not. But I think supporting farmers through, as we said earlier, CSAs, community supported agriculture, is a good way to do that. Also attending local farmers market and sourcing food directly from the growers. I know farmers that I know often feel that their work is undervalued or underappreciated, and it's a bit of a struggle to be a farmer, I think, unless you're a large-scale, commercially industrial-scale farmer. I don't know, what do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So CSA, we talked about earlier on, just that importance of providing that guaranteed revenue in advance of the growing season is so important to the farmers. Farmers markets is typically the opportunity for them to sell their goods to the public. So being able to support farmers markets and shop at farmers markets versus retail grocery stores is really positive in my opinion. And being a farmer it's really hard work, and beyond just the hard work, it's also very scary because you're reliant on the environment and the weather, and you don't have control over those things. So you could do absolutely everything right and still not have a good crop at the end of the year, and what that means financially to your business, and if it's a small family owned business, that's that can have some significant impact. So the more we can do to support our farmers, the better. I like to share one quick story. So with the UBC farm, we started a chef's harvest day at the farm probably about 5 summers ago. And so the chefs and our apprentices go out to the farm and we work with the farmers. And it's one day. The farmers do it throughout the whole year, and we're just there for one day. But just the back-breaking labor that it takes to actually harvest fruits and vegetables from the farms, in the rain, in the super hot days and direct sunlight, it is not easy work. And the experience that my chefs had was, I can't teach that type of learning. It's far too easy for us to pick up the phone and food arrives at our door the next day in and day out. It's flawless. But to see what it actually takes to make that food and harvest that food and get it to our doors was an incredible learning experience for myself and for my team. So that's something that we continue to do every year now.
It's an excellent point. And I would just like to add, it's not only physically demanding, it's intellectually demanding. The amount of planning and research and scheduling and business, you have to know how to be a business person, a marketing person, transportation person, and the kind of work it takes to plan ahead so that everything is going in the ground at the right time with the best varieties from the best suppliers, getting to the market at the right time. It's also a very difficult intellectual pursuit, not only a physical pursuit, I think, to be a farmer. Anyway, that's my farming rant for today. That brings us close to the end of our time for today. Thank you so much for joining us, David. I feel like there's so much more that you could teach us, so much more to learn. I hope that we have a chance to talk with you again in the future. Thank you very much for making time for us today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Karin, and happy to come back anytime.
Okay, thank you. Before we sign off, I just wanted to give our people who are joining us today a few ideas on how to prepare your garden for winter. to get everything ready so that we can get growing first thing in the spring. So this is a good time of year to be removing any dead or diseased plant material that you see in your garden. It's not a bad idea to apply mulch to insulate the soil, to help it retain moisture, reduce the risk of erosion from rain events, and protect your roots. I like to use compost actually as a mulch in the winter. Winter, when the plants are dormant, is a good time for pruning for a lot of the plants that you grow in your garden. So do a bit of research before you start pruning, so you know that the plant that you're pruning at the appropriate time. But big pruning season is coming up as soon as the plants become dormant. We remind you to leave your leaves in place. Maybe if you have access to a lawnmower, you mow them so that they're a finer mulch so that they decompose more easily. A lot of insects, such as ladybugs, our friends the ladybugs, will overwinter in leaf piles, so it's good to leave them in place. And this is a good time of year to clean and store your tools so that they're ready to go in spring. I often will, as a Christmas present from my husband, bless his heart, he will sharpen up all my tools for me so that they're ready to go in the spring. So doesn't cost anything, but it is greatly appreciated. Hint, hint, Michael, if you're listening. Okay. This is a great time to plan for spring. Start ordering your seeds now. Places like West Coast Seeds are already having plants for sale for next season. So it's a good time to start planning your garden and ordering seeds if you are someone who's going to be growing from seed in the spring. Thank you very much for joining us today and for joining us throughout the season. This is it for our 2024 live stream series. You can review our previous segments. They have been posted to the Grow Green website at growgreenguide.ca. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. Good luck with your fall harvest, and I look forward to seeing you again next spring.